Thank you for your purchase. I am your ArcCorp Media Individual Entertainer, or Amy for short. The Palmetto Pirate Part 3, The Hold-Up, originally written by Ralph Poole in 2808. Rights acquired by ArcCorp Media Company in 2952. Current sale price 7 credits.
We join our cargo-hauling companions in the midst of a dastardly interdiction. What will these nefarious, ill-intent rogues preying on hard-working citizens want? Will our clever captain risk companion and cargo, or will he capitulate? Let us see the conclusion of the hold-up.
The freelancer came to an abrupt stop, warning bells and lights illuminated in a sea of yellow and red. The cooldown timer on the quantum drive kicked off, starting its long cooldown. Muscle memory ignited, and Captain DeRitter's hands sprang into action with a mind of their own. In any other circumstance, the quickness of his movements could be considered graceful, like a master pianist honing his craft. Still, this was not one of those times. This was a life-or-death situation where adrenaline fueled his swiftness. Captain DeRitter's mind raced. He didn't even look up to see what had jerked his ship out of quantum. It honestly didn't matter. Javelin or Titan, his actions would be the same. Sweat, even in a cold flight deck, rolled down each side of his face, splashing onto the grey console and leaving a breadcrumb trail to each system he worked. Shields. Always shields first, even above engines and quantum drive. No use running if all they'll do is punch holes through you. Both Jamali shields were alive and in the green. A muffled thumping sound reverberated through the ship, like the plucking of a giant cello cord. From his peripheral, the captain could see the blue static arcing across the front viewport as the shield absorbed another bolt from a bulldog repeater. With every thump, the shield gauge would dance, then set at its new strength level. A new light flickered on the dash. Unlike the rest, this light was green. The small print under the light read turret power. Soon after, bolts began flying in the opposite direction towards the assailants. The knowledge that Wade was in the turret sparked a small amount of hope in the captain, to the point where he realised he hadn't excelled in forever. The break in his concentration allowed him to give himself permission to look up finally to see what he faced. The bright red glowing ball in the abdomen of a mantis was unmistakable against the black void. 2 cutlasses and a hodgepodge of light fighters circled the trapped freelancer like vultures picking at a soon-to-be carcass. Floating head-on, just out of repeater range, was the unmistakable, gold-trimmed, white cutlass.
Shit!
That was all that the captain could say in response to the ominous white cutlass. That was all that was needed to be said. DeRitter hit the intercom button.
See it?
Yeah.
Wade's voice was strained and barely audible over the sound of the turret firing. Any hauler worth their weight in laranite has heard stories of the white cutlass of a painted black palm tree tail flash.
Hell yeah.
A small explosion ignited as Wade clipped a wing off one of the circling buccaneers. For the briefest of moments, it felt like there was a chance to get out of this situation alive. Captain DeRitter checked his weapon systems and the quantum drive status. He quickly ran checklist items through his head, preparing himself and his ship to fight its way out. The once motionless flagship Cutlass started twisting its nose to the side, exposing its broadside to the freelancer. The side door facing the captain began to slide open. A massive muzzle poked out from the dark hold of the Cutlass. The distinctive chromed compensator of the massive Deadbolt 6 lurched its way out. The diameter of the muzzle was wide enough to fit a man's head inside. Captain DeRitter stared at the Cutlass in disbelief and bewilderment. He sat, frozen more in confusion than fear.
Are you seeing...
The muzzle erupted, spouting a brief but bright ball of fire. All of the visual cues were there to signal to the brain that a gun was fired. It was the absence of any sound that made everything surreal. Regardless of the surrealness surrounding its lack of sound, the physical characteristics were all too present. The benefit of using ballistic ammo is that shields have little effect, especially the shields of a freelancer. The ship reverberated under the impact of the round. That sound was most definitely real. The captain began scanning instruments. There was no chance his ship went through that without damage. Nothing. He scanned again, left to right, top to bottom. Nothing but his already Christmas tree of illuminated or flashing yellow and red cautionary lights. No new lights, no dropping gauges, and no power loss. Just a sea of yellow and red. Just yellow. And no green light.
Wade!
Static.
Wade, come in!
Static still. The turret power was no longer green, but it also wasn't red. Red would have indicated a fault, or something that needed attention, but for it to be greyed out and darkened meant something entirely different. A new light blinked on his center console. Incoming hail. That brief, fleeting feeling of hope leaked from the captain like a ruptured hydraulic line. Time to see if the fables were true. Time to add his story to the growing legend. De Ritter accepted the hail.
Good evening, Captain De Ritter. I think that is enough for our first interaction. Would you not say? I would be very appreciative if you turned your quantum drive off and lowered your signatures.
De Ritter moved his finger over the power button, wavering, knowing the ultimate admission this would mean. He peeked out of the corner of his eyes at his throttle sticks.
Please don't.
Another hydraulic line of hope ruptured, and with it, the last bit of resistance.
The next round will be through the cockpit viewport.
Resigned to whatever outcome lay ahead, the captain killed the drive, watching the gauge spool down. In a smooth sequence, he then hit the shield power button and opened the back cargo door. With no quantum drive, there was little reason to delay the inevitable. Captain De Ritter rose from the pilot's chair like an old man trying to get his knees to remember their job of holding his weight. Over his shoulder, the ominous chrome muzzle slides back into its dark home. Out the back ramp of the Cutlass, a similarly painted hoverquad floated out with an equally white-armoured driver. The captain kept walking to the crew quarters airlock door, where he grabbed his helmet off the hook. Walking through the door, he snapped the helmet on, pressure sealing it. The mid-cargo section was stacked with crates filled with various precious metals, once headed for a station in need. Through the airlock door window, the white hoverquad could be seen floating in and resting sideways on the lowered ramp. The white-armoured figure swung his leg exaggeratively over the quad, resting both hands on their hips as the newly arrived pirate took in the prized catch. Captain De Ritter watched the movements of his captor, trying to analyse intent from motion. It seemed like a fruitless endeavour, as he couldn't even come to the decision of the rogue's gender, let alone intention. The figure strolled forward, taking mental note of the items as he walked by. Looking up, the captain hoped to see a glimpse of his first mate, but instead he saw the answer as to why the console light was dead instead of red. The turret's emergency airlock was sealed shut. Insulation from the ceiling surrounding the turret was burnt and torn. Brand and broken wires arced, and only one of the raising and lowering guide rods remained attached. All clear signs that the turret was not stowed, but yet completely blown off. De Ritter stepped back as the figure entered the airlock door and into the mid-cargo section. Even though the door was sealed behind him and the environment was stable to not need helmets, both members made no movement to remove their helmets and expose what they looked like underneath.
Captain De Ritter, it is a pleasure to see the man behind the name.
De Ritter made no movement, fully aware that this was the person infamously known as the Palmetto Pirate. He hoped the rumours were true. The Palmetto Pirate wore a simple, all-white RSI undersuit lined in gold trim. His light armour was a modified RSI Venture set, bright ivory white, also with gold trim lettering. Quite visible on his hip was an oversized coater pistol. It looked handcrafted, as the grip guards were a form of polished bone, surely from exotic animals. Unfazed by the lack of response, Palmetto continued his pleasantries.
I apologize about the turret. That's not how I usually like to conduct business. We will be taking a few items, enough to be profitable, but not enough to wipe you out. I am sure your insurance will make you whole.
The captain still made no movement, and still the pirate continued unfazed, touching the pad strapped to his other wrist.
You're clear. Crates are already marked. Yes, leave the medical supplies. Also, the mid-cargo cabin takes half.
The pirate redirected his attention back to the captain. It was impossible to see through the visor, but for some reason you could sense the pirate was smiling.
You have a beautiful ship, Sam.
The shock of the Palmetto Pirate knowing his name had to be visible in the captain's body language. Having someone know so much about you was an eerie feeling, like being stripped naked in front of someone. If his shock was visible, the pirate did nothing to indicate he saw.
Don't worry. We will be quick and you can be on your way soon enough. The station will still get most of its supplies, and the insurance company will reimburse you for the loss. Unless my math is off, you should not lose anything out of your own pocket.
Thank you.
Come, let us move to the crew quarters while the men do their work.
Palmetto patted the captain on his shoulder and ushered him towards the airlock door. Once inside the crew quarters, the two turned and faced each other. The genteel pirate folded his arms, seemingly sizing up the man before him.
I appreciate you understanding the situation you found yourself in. I prefer for interactions to be civil like this.
From the dark corner of the upper bunk bed, a darkened figure moved, catching the eye of De Ritter. The captain froze, uncertain as to what this figure was. An apparition from some nightmarish hell that plagued the captain's dreams. The pirate in front of him made no movement that he sensed the unwelcomed guest. The figure's movements were smooth, almost fluid. The darkness slides over the edge of the bunk and down the short ladder, pooling at the floorboard. The pool of darkness rose, stacking on top of itself until the image hit the cabin lights. This wasn't a hellish figure, it was Wade. Afraid to stare, Captain De Ritter still remained frozen in place. Was this a ghost? A hallucination from stress? The first mate, Wade Mathis, stood behind the pirate, his eyes fixated on the intruder. Wade towered both above and to the sides of the Palmetto. Had he stayed, the dark figure, his size would have been enough to wash over the all-white pirate, enveloping him in a wave of darkness. Captain De Ritter stood, watching the events unfold in front of him. A small part of him wanted to yell out to his intruder, warn him of impending doom. This conflict wrestled with his senses. Was this the effect the Palmetto was known for? Able to spin honeyed words, disarming victims physically and psychologically? Mr. Mathis raised his arms above his head, grasping some miscellaneous steel pipe, his muscle tensing as much mustered strength as possible. De Ritter's eyes darted from Wade to Palmetto and back again. The person before him remained in the same arm-folded, relaxed state as before. The backward movement of the pipe stopped and reversed course instantly, heading downward with as much malice and ill intent as possible. A loud phased shot rang out. The captain jumped, startled by the unexpected noise. The pipe, once headed towards Palmetto's head, stopped frozen in time. The longest of seconds ticked by as no other sound or motion occurred. Only Captain De Ritter stood confused. The other two instantly knew what had happened. Wade's hands dropped to his side. The pipe clanged to the floor, finally breaking the enduring silence. Palmetto took a step to his left, also dropping his folded arms to his side. Under his left arm hung a holstered, modified, snub-nosed arc-light pistol. The pirate's visor remained forward, gazing at Sam, wondering what reaction was to follow. The movement of the pirate allowed the light from the cabin to flow through the two-finger-sized hole in Wade's chest. Wade slumped to his knees, then gradually fell over to the side, resting against the bottom bunk bed frame.
Sam, I apologize. Mr. Mathis, I am sure, was a good crew member.
The Palmetto Pirate reached to his wrist again.
Put 2 of the gold crates back. Don't make me repeat myself, please. Also send a cleaning team up to the crew quarters. No, Mr. Mathis, not the captain.
An awkward silence fell over the cabin. The events that just happened still barely registered in Sam's mind. Palmetto made a quick reach to his wrist.
Oh, and bring a bottle of Radagast, the homeward 40-year-old one. It's in my quarters, you'll see it.
Moments later, the airlock opened and 3 men entered. Without a word, 2 went over to the lifeless first mate and picked him up. They exited the same airlock without any direction or acknowledgement. The third man opened a bag and went over to Wade's bunk. He started removing all items from the bunk and locker. When he finished, he made the bed, sprayed something onto all the hard surfaces in the immediate area, and then left with a bag over his shoulder.
What is...
Palmetto raised his hand. The airlock opened again, but this time the man walked straight to Palmetto and handed him a bottle. Without a word, he too left through the airlock. Only the captain and Palmetto remained.
Now, I know the 2 crates won't be enough to cover the loss of Mr. Mathis, but it is the least we can do. He was such a large man. I do hope you didn't mind me taking the liberty of removing him. Judging by your size difference, I assumed it would have been a struggle for you to get him out into space. I would also encourage that once you arrive at your destination, that you make it known you flew alone. While we did sanitize your ship, it isn't enough to stop the most basic of inquiries.
The pirate raised the bottle in his hands, admiring the sight briefly, before handing it to the captain.
This is one of my favorites. A Radagast Homeward 40 SEY Old. Limited release. Hard to find, easy to drink. You could probably sell it for a couple thousand credits and make up some losses today, but I encourage you to instead keep it. It is quite amazing, and there aren't many left.
Captain de Ritter took the bottle, holding it without looking at it, the fog of the events finally wearing off.
Why are you doing this? Why are you letting me keep anything at all? Plus this bottle. I don't understand. You are pirating me, and yet for some reason I almost feel grateful for this.
Oh, Sam, let's be blunt. Yes, we are pirating you. Yes, we killed your first mate. And yes, we are letting you leave with some livelihood left. See, this doesn't have to be an unpleasant experience. I had hoped to sit and have a glass with you while the men worked. The events, unfortunately, unraveled tonight. But we can still be gentlemen, right? We can still be professionals, right?
Palmetto grabbed Captain de Ritter by the shoulders, patted him twice, then turned and left through the airlock, leaving Sam to be alone with his thoughts. De Ritter turned, walking back to the flight deck. As he passed his own bunk, he tossed the liquor bottle onto the bed and kept walking. Inside the flight deck, the white hoverquad could be seen racing across the void back to the White Cutlass. De Ritter flopped into the pilot seat, numb to the events that just happened. He began his pre-flight checks from muscle memory. Without a word, his captors dissipated into the void, leaving him alone to continue on. Unsure what to do next, Captain de Ritter realigned his quantum drive, looked over to the empty co-pilot seat, and then punished the freelancer back into quantum travel.
So ends another interdiction with the Palmetto Pirate. Join us in the future endeavors as the Palmetto Pirate travels the verse. Nefarious pirate? Blight of society? Will the UEE Navy ever catch this rascal? Or will the gentile swashbuckler continue to evade the daft fuzz that dogs his heels? Stay tuned for the next story of the Palmetto Pirate.